Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome back to Excelling Psychology. In this series, in which we are seeing how to prepare for concepts in the simplest way possible, we've already covered 5 concepts and we are left with the sixth one, which is responsibility. We will cover that also today. If I had to rate the easiest and the most difficult concepts, like whatever I have experienced with students till now, students would rank, in my opinion, responsibility as the easiest one. Second would be measurement. Third would be bias, and the most difficult would be perspective. Second would be change, and third would be causality. That's what I believe. Everyone can have a different view, but this is what I have observed with students. So today is a video which you would like, which you would find relaxed, so it's going to be good to go through. And as always, before we begin, I want you to know that I'm a private tutor for IB Psychology and I also sell notes for your course. So if you want the store link or my contact details, you can visit the description box and pin comment below. Also, if you haven't already, please watch the bias video at least before watching this one. I recommend you watch all 5 in the series before watching this one. But at least watch the bias video, because how we are going about it, how we are supposed to practice, what is the ideal practicing format and structure, I have explained thoroughly in that video. I won't be repeating everything here. Okay, so today we will begin with responsibility directly. And yeah, let's start with the first step, which is noting down what are the most common points for responsibility. I hope across my videos, for every concept I've given you the most common points, you've noted them already. If you haven't, just revisit the videos and make sure like you have a list in front of you that okay, under uh, the first one, bias, these points are more common than under causality, these, so that list will prevent your stress and anxiety. I don't know what to write about. If you have that list, that structure in front of you, you'll be relaxed. So make it like a revision list in front of you. Okay, so coming to responsibility, which are the most common points. Actually, responsibility, more than listing 4 points, it's just that take your list of ethics, human ethics, animal ethics, and just refer to that. Okay, you don't even need to make the points, but still, because we are following a particular structure, let me go along with that. So I will club some of the ethics together because I want to fit into that format, that 4 point format, 4 common point format. See, in responsibility, the most common thing we would be discussing firstly would be informed consent, right to withdraw, and confidentiality. If these are there, it is a strength because the human participants in psychology research are being respected, they are being shown giving the right of their dignity. If they are not there, then it's a problem. Next is deception and debriefing. If deception is there and debriefing is there, it's a strength. Deception gets justified to an extent. If deception is there but debriefing is not there, that's a big issue. That should not be the case. It's a very big weakness. Next is going beyond the ethics, which go a little beyond procedure of the study to reporting and publishing the results, social sensitivity, or sometimes called social responsibility. If the results are such that can create panic and chaos in society, okay, even if not that level, but which can hurt certain groups, which can be misused to discriminate against certain groups, it's a problem. If the research is on normal everyday topics, non-controversial, non-socially sensitive topics, that's a strength, it's good. Finally, cost benefit analysis. Is the whatever being done with participants, unethical things being done with participants, deception, hurting them, harming them, justified in the face of what society stands to gain from this study? Or is it what participants having to suffer disproportionate to what society can gain out of this study, that needs to be considered. So if the benefits are higher, the publishing of this research can give society something very important, it's a strength, then even some minor inconvenience caused to participants can get justified in the face of it. But if society doesn't stand to gain anything substantial from this research, and yet participants are being harassed even to a limited degree, absolutely unjustified, and it's a weakness. Two things before we come to annotating the stimulus. One, if it is an animal study that is being presented, so let's say some rat study, monkey study has been given, then these two points which I have noted at the beginning, they get replaced. These guidelines apply only to humans. I'm going to discuss in this video for brevity's sake only the human guidelines, because most stimuli are going to be about humans. But if animal come, then replacement, substitution, all those guidelines, you will have to start discussing those. Housing, uh, substitution, replacement, this thing, distress to animals, those guidelines you will have to discuss here. Second, some of you would be wondering why I've not taken harm in this, like psychological harm, physical harm. That's a very favorite point, easy to discuss also, because it gets overlapped with, I will show you, when we are doing the stimulus with deception, with informed consent, it becomes a part of it. I don't need to list it separately. So these are the points that will apply, of course, to any stimulus, because either the study given or which we are preparing for 1C, either it's going to be high with respect to these things have been followed, or it's going to be low on reported weaknesses. So it's going to apply anywhere. So keeping these points in mind, now we'll do what we always do. We will annotate the stimulus. We will keep on marking which sections of the stimulus can be helpful to us in further discussing these points. So coming to the aim, researchers wanted to investigate whether schemas influence memory for everyday events. In the aim, there's nothing for ethics, because right now we don't even know what they're doing in the procedure. So procedure will become the critical part for ethics. They recruited 120 undergraduate students from volunteer email advertisements. Volunteers suggest that there is at least some level of informed consent. Like, it's not a field study where participants don't know your study is taking place until then they have no idea. Definitely not. They are volunteers on their own. They are coming to participate, even if a false purpose has been given. Some purpose has been given. They know that they are in a research study, so it will be a plus for informed consent. Participants were told that the study is examining memory for short films. Considering that the aim was schemas influencing memory, now they are being told that it's memory for short films. There's a discrepancy between the true aim and the purpose they are being given. This definitely makes for a point of deception. Right at the beginning only they've been deceived. Each participant watched 2-minute video of a woman visiting a supermarket to buy groceries. Video included ordinary shopping sections and common supermarket. Here there's nothing. Like, there's nothing that's going to hurt participants. They're not being exposed to something violent or disturbing or something. It's just a supermarket situation. So nothing to note here. After watching the video, they completed a Sudoku puzzle to reduce immediate rehearsal. They don't seem to know the purpose. They are just assuming everything has to do with memory. So all this is like entrenched in deception only. They then answered a 40-item recognition test. This is also very deceptive. They are not expecting this, that purposely items will be written just to lure them or to induce them to select those items. So they are being deceived. They are being made to believe that certain items were there in the video clip just to test whether they'll accurately reject those items or not. And their confidence ratings are being taken. Then two researchers independently scored the recognition using the same marking. Okay, so far, at least in the procedure, there is no mention of, okay, they were given a right to withdraw or they were debriefed, because deception is there. Still, they are not telling that some debriefing was done. So it seems like some ethics have not been followed. At least they have not told us whether these were followed. It seems to be an issue in this study. So in the procedure only that becomes clear, but still, just to be like doubly safe or cautious, let's read till the very end in case ahead they have mentioned something. Otherwise, we will note it as, okay, right to withdraw and debriefing, we don't know about anything. Participants correctly recognized average of 16.820 real events. All this has nothing to do with responsibility directly in the procedure. Like participants, what they are going through, we have already seen. The procedure results is not adding to it. At most, further deception can be noted because 6.3 errors were made on average, so they have been deceived into using their schemas while recognizing. False memories commonly involved taking a shopping basket, etc. Conclusion: researchers concluded that existing schemas help people organize memory but also make them remember expected events that never happened. Now that we've reached the end of the study, now we are confident that there was no right to withdraw and there was no debrief. So we can just note that. At least it's not mentioned, so what can we do? We will assume it was not there. But when we are writing, we'll write tentatively. It should have been there. We won't make any assumption it was there or not because we don't know. So we'll say it should have been there given the nature of the study that way. So no right to withdraw, no debriefing. Now that we are clear on which guidelines were followed, which were not, the other things we have written in the annotation, now we can note some things about them also. Number one, in terms of cost benefit analysis, there are costs to the participants in this study. That they are being deceived, it's not a major cost, like they're not being disturbed and distressed by what they're seeing, but there is deception. I will talk about performance anxiety also when we come to the outline. Then that is a cost they are paying. The benefit that society can get from this study, like knowing how schema influences memory, is it worth it to cause participants this embarrassment or this anxiety in the study? That is what we'll be considering in cost benefit analysis. So now that we know these costs are there in the study, participants have been deprived of some rights which they should have had, like right to withdraw and right to information on debriefing. Now we can consider that issue, whether the benefits are substantial or not. Secondly, coming to social responsibility. Now that we've seen till the end, okay, this is what they've concluded. What they've reported in the study, we don't know because they have not shown us the full study report. But we can assume that what they've concluded, around that only they must have written a report that schemas influence memory. Is this a socially sensitive issue? If they say in general everyone gets influenced by schemas and memories get impacted by schemas, are they targeting a specific group? Are they making statements like this particular group is prone to reconstructive memory, or this particular group is going to cause harm to others because their memory is not accurate? Are they creating some tension in society by presenting these results? Those are things we'll consider under socially sensitive research. Frankly speaking, as of now, it does not seem to be anything that can result in social problems. Okay, so now given that we have finished the annotation, we have seen mainly in the procedure all the annotation is there for responsibility. Now let us consider what we can write in the outline. Number one, when it comes to informed consent, right to withdraw, etc., it is there to a limited extent. Like I told you, these are volunteers, but they don't know the whole purpose of the study. True consent is not taken unless we have told them exactly what is happening in the study and why it is being done. So true consent is not there. Partial consent is there. That is the term we generally use. So I will note in the outline. And this is a weakness, especially given that, combined with the issue which we are going to see next, deception. It is an issue because on the one hand they're not being told everything about the study, on top of that they're being deceived into giving a performance which can cause them some anxiety. It's not very justified, so it'll come in the weakness category. This point I'll be expanding upon also while writing, so there you will understand it further. Coming to deception debriefing, deception is definitely there. Participants are just being told that memory is being assessed. There's no mention of a schema also. They are just assuming that they have to see a video clip and report it as accurately as possible. They are not even thinking that their pre-existing knowledge is supposed to influence what they are seeing, and researchers are going to evaluate them on that basis, like their performance on that basis. So all of the true purpose has been hidden from them. They've been deceived into giving a test. Now here we come to a critical point. Whenever we test participants, be it like, it's not a big test, it's not like their career is being determined on the basis of how they perform on this test, but it's still a test. And most people do become anxious when they have to give tests, especially if they've been deceived, and later if they come to know that that was not the purpose, they can also be embarrassed that they became susceptible to schemas. Later when they come to know that, oh, I marked the loyalty card, the conveyor belt, those were not there in the schema in the video, and I still reported it. They start feeling embarrassed that how I am so vulnerable to remembering anything. Do I not even watch the clips properly? How much of my memory must be getting impacted like this in everyday life? They might start questioning themselves or doubting themselves that, is my memory always vulnerable? Am I always making a lot of mistakes because of my memory? To what extent my memory is impacting me in my everyday life? They might get disturbed about these things. We are not saying these are traumas, these are big disturbances, or emotionally they must be torn apart because of these things. No, but it is disturbance. It is emotional disturbance. It is causing anxiety and embarrassment to participants. That cannot be denied. So, how I would put it in an outline is performance anxiety and potential embarrassment because of deception, because of not being told the true purpose. It is a weakness. Given that debriefing is not done later, at least in debriefing, if they would have explained to the participants that we had to do this, what was the reason for doing, because we could not induce demand characteristics, and everyone gets impacted, everyone's memory is vulnerable in this way, so this is not an exception with you, and these are the true implications in real life, like they're not so substantial. If this education would have been given to them, at least we could say that the deception was offset by the debriefing. We could have given it as a strength. That is not the case here. So what we would say is potential embarrassment, no debriefing is a weakness. Write tentatively, like I told you when you're writing, that debriefing should have been there to offset these problems. Don't write only whether it was there or not. If they are not telling us that it is there or it's not there explicitly, then just write it should have been there. So be safe that way. I want to remind you that what I tell you, what I just explained to you, I explained to you in context. In this study, this is how they must have felt anxious. This is how they must have been embarrassed. Write it that way. What we are writing in the outline, only that much you don't have to write. Like put in a sentence and finish it. You have to expand it fully, like I explained it to you. Next is social responsibility. Like I told you, this is not a socially sensitive topic. The researchers, firstly, they are making a broad claim that schemas influence memory. That also memory for a mundane situation, supermarket shopping. So there is no emotional value to the situation that they've taken. When it comes to saying that because of schemas there are errors, they have not implied anything like specific groups are going to make errors because of that. Certain groups have memory issues, like say hypothetically only women have memory issues, only people belonging to certain races or religions have memory issues. They have not made any claim like that. And also when they look at how schemas impact memory procedurally, also they have been very objective, just shown a video clip to participants which is more or less harmless, and taking a quick recognition test, a quick confidence rating from the participants. So no such thing has been done which can create problems in society in terms of groups feeling targeted, in terms of people feeling like some very major crisis is there in terms of mental health, nothing like that. So what I would put it down as, it is an ordinary cognitive exploration. These type of studies keep getting done in the area of schemas, memory, recognition. No social sensitivity is involved in this, which is a strength. It's a benefit. This research does not stand to create any disturbance in society. Finally, cost benefit analysis. Given that some embarrassment and anxiety is there in the study, we can't deny that. Is it justified? What are the potential benefits of doing research like this? I hope you've studied your schemas topic properly in the content. That can be really helpful here. Knowing that our memories are reconstructive, they are vulnerable, they are not factual. Schemas influence what we remember. We don't remember events as they occurred. Can be very useful in everyday life also. We can be more careful about the confidence we place in our memories for very simple situations like supermarket shopping. When we recollect and tell others about what an experience has been, like say a supermarket experience, we can be careful into giving them accurate information that they can then use for their own shopping. So we should not tell things with unnecessary confidence, and we should be just a little careful in what we are recalling about our experiences. That's one. And in larger scale events, more impactful events like eyewitness testimony, for example, where memory really matters. It holds to deciding whether a person is innocent or guilty of charges pressed on them, there definitely this is a very important area. It's very important to investigate how schemas influence memory, because huge decisions of a person's innocence or guilt can also be based on the memory that a participant has, which in turn is getting influenced by schema. So, given that these benefits are there, major benefits in improving everyday quality of life, as well as addressing larger concerns in psychology in terms of decision making, the cost that participants had to suffer, some embarrassment, some anxiety in the study, is justified. So, that is why we would say, in terms of cost benefit analysis, it is a strength what has been done in this study. So, how we can put it in the outline is, schemas benefit avoidance of reconstructive memory in making decisions. Strength. So this is the outline, and before this I have shown you the annotation. Now the last step, as always, that we are going to do, which is expanding on one point, practicing one point thoroughly for the answer. Okay, so the first point that I had taken, informed consent and all, that I will expand upon. One strength. I'm sorry, one weakness. What are we doing in the point? We are just pointing out literally that this is a strength or this is a weakness of responsibility that we will be discussing in this paragraph. So we always start that way. Instead of starting abruptly and leaving it for the examiner to understand after reading what we are talking about, we make it clear right at the beginning. That helps them also to follow through the point. So one weakness is that only partial consent was obtained from participants in the study. Now, there are many studies in which only partial consent is obtained. How is it specific to this study? In this study, where did we see that only partial consent was there? We need to give context of that. So, that is known as evidence. The next point. Researchers selected volunteers who knew they were participating in a study but were given a false purpose of examination of memory for short films instead of true purpose impact of schemas on memory. So here I have shown only part consent is there, because as such, being volunteers, they know they are in a study, but full consent is not there. They don't know exactly what they are participating in. Now at the beginning I've mentioned that this is a weakness. How is this a weakness? I need to explain that now, again in context of the study. So this is a weakness because participants' ethical right of knowing the true nature of assessment they were being subject to was violated. Okay, so the assessment in terms of recognition test, why it is being done exactly, they don't know about it. Then coming to link, how we end a paragraph is with a conclusion. They've asked us to evaluate the study in terms of responsibility. So that larger evaluation that we are doing, what we have written till now, how it is connecting back to that or linking back to that, we just need to end with that. This shows that, this suggests that, or therefore, we just need to write that. This suggests that researchers' responsibility towards participants' right was not fully maintained in this study. In a conclusion, name that concept again. That's the best way of being focused. Responsibility word should come again in the conclusion to make sure that you are ending the point correctly. You're linking back to what was originally asked. So that is the end of this very brief series, less number of videos, short videos on how to practice your concepts. 3 more points are there in this one, which we made in the outline, but we did not expand on. That is your challenge. That is your exercise to expand on those points, just like this one. And if you do, your full answer, at least half answer is ready. So I will come soon back with some more IB videos, some different type of videos which will be helpful to you. Until then, keep on practicing these concepts. There's so much to practice in terms of applying these concepts to different types of studies, different research methods, and thinking beyond these points also. Like I told you, these are just the most common ones, but to challenge yourself and to think of points which go beyond this also, there's a lot that can be prepared in this way. So keep doing that to not only prepare for your exam well, but to enjoy the subject of psychology. The more you use your mind and all, it seems counterintuitive, like it seems like a task in the beginning, but the more you enjoy the subject, the more you get involved in it. Thank you for watching this series. Like I told you, I'll be back soon with some other helpful series to you. Until then, keep watching this one, like revisiting these videos and also the previous IB videos. The whole playlist is there on my channel. A lot of other useful videos are also already there on what to expect in different papers of the new syllabus and how to approach those different questions. So till I see you again, all the best for your practice and goodbye.